Hi everyone, it's Eli. You know how sometimes you stumble upon something truly game-changing in healthcare? Well, I found it. KinetiSense. This cutting-edge motion capture technology is transforming movement, assessment, and recovery. Imagine getting instant AI-driven insights without any wearables on your patient. That's right, no ping pong balls needed. Just pure, accurate data. Perfect for boosting athletic performance, pinpointing imbalances, and refining rehab. Top professionals worldwide trust KinetiSense to maximize productivity and results. Check out our partner page to learn more. Experience the revolution in movement. Welcome to Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More, the podcast that gives you a viewpoint in sports medicine that can't be found anywhere else. I'm your host, Eli Halleck, and we have a fantastic show ahead of us today. So, let's get started. Welcome to Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More. Today, we've got an episode we've been working on for a few months. We're going to be talking 3D motion capturing systems, clinically taking care of patients, and how to use this new device. It's absolutely stunning. It's really cool. I don't know how else to describe it. So today we're going to be talking to Dr. Ryan Como, the CEO of KinetiSense. And Ryan, how are you doing today?
Eli, doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and thank you for your patience and willingness to make this happen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, it's fun. I know we've been working on this for a while, so we've had some issues pop up, and God, life happens. So I'm just happy we finally got this, because when we saw this online, we're like, oh my God, what is this? And I got to find out how this came to be, where it popped into your head, or why don't you first off tell me about your healthcare background, how you got into where you're at now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's there's like the long story, and then there's the medium length story, and then there's the short version of it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a hybrid between the short version and the medium length version. For me, I grew up in sports. So I'm from Canada, and like every Canadian plays hockey. That's just the sport that we play. We live in the frozen tundra. So I started off playing hockey and ended up getting to, a higher level of hockey and really loved sports. I just loved playing sports, and performance was something that was really important, of course, as you start to get to these higher levels of sport. And then also trying to prevent injury and trying to rehab from injury. So athletes of every level, that's something we have to deal with. It's something that's always in the back of our mind. So long story short, played hockey, ended up getting a scholarship to the University of Alaska, and started my biological science degree while playing NCAA hockey, Division I hockey. And I grew up in a medical family. My father's a general practitioner. I have three younger brothers. Two of them are medical doctors. One is a chiropractor, and I am also a chiropractor. I'll speak a little bit to why that's relevant a little bit further on in the story. But ended up going to play university hockey. My first year up there playing, I was constantly getting injured. I was a goaltender. The first week of the season, I ended up injuring my knee. Just going into a butterfly, all of a sudden felt my knee buckle and ended up, getting a micro tear in my meniscus. Had to go through all of the rehab and everything like that. And that was really my exposure to the performance and rehab side, and working with physical therapists, chiropractors, sports medicine doctors. I was getting all different types of treatments. Finally, after 3 months, get to the point where I can go back and play, and my right hip starts to go on me. So I end up
Mm.
getting injured in my right
Starting to
hip
see that
again.
chain kick up,
Yeah,
right?
it was
Yeah.
unbelievable. And then again at the time, I didn't have any of the clinical knowledge to understand what was going on, but I was seeing all these different practitioners. And again, now they're all honing in on my hip. They're honing in on the area of concern, which, makes sense to a certain degree. Finally rehab from that. All of a sudden, my right low back goes on me after getting back from my hip.
Oh
So I
my
kid you
God.
not, I'm talking about the entirety of my first year of playing NCAA Division I hockey. I'm trying to break in on this team and trying to, establish myself. I'm in the rehab room basically the entire year. Again, I'm realizing that a lot of these different practitioners, whether it was the team chiropractor, the team physical therapist, the massage therapist, the sports med team, they were all kind of assessing me a different way. They were all using very subjective assessment tools. I mean, like I think one of them used a goniometer, an inclinometer to look at specific joint range of motion. The other ones were eyeballing their assessments. And I was kind of blown away. I'm like, there's really no congruency here. And I wonder if there was a congruency, if they were all speaking the same language, would I have had a better shot at rehab that would have maybe been a faster rehab process? And this is interesting how it's all right side issues. What's going on with my body on the right side, the chain that is causing me to compensate and have stress points at different parts of my body, at different joints of my body that from a non-contact standpoint put me at this point of risk of injury and actual injury. So this intrigued me so much to the point that when I went to chiropractic school, we were in my last year of chiropractic school and we're doing advanced biomechanics assessment course. And FMS and SFMA were kind of out at that point or coming out at that point. And FMS is again, and SFMA are movement based, visual based functional movement screens, changed the game, honestly, but are subjective in nature. And I was like, man, there's got to be a better way of doing this because I know that I knew the universities had these amazing biomechanics labs. They're called Vicon systems. So these are like 13 camera, setups where you wear the black suit with the ping pong balls
Dots
and
everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
dots everywhere. And you see these on these EA Sports commercials, right?
Oh,
Like
yes. Oh,
a lot of your
yes.
listeners, if they don't know what a Vicon is, that's, you see your athlete wearing the suits and it's amazing because you get this incredible three-dimensional data. We call it triplanar, three planes, frontal plane, sagittal plane, transverse plane. The human body, we move in three planes. This is like a really, really important concept to why our system we think is so revolutionary in this space. We have to see three planes of movement, X, Y, Z, frontal, sagittal, transverse. And these Vicon systems are incredible at this. However, these are lab systems. So you got to put the suit on. And then you got to move the markers around. And then you got to calibrate all of the different cameras. And then you got to run the person through. And then you have to look at the XYZ data that comes out and have some biomechanical knowledge of what this is. And then be able to, run it through different models and also incredible for research, not usable in a clinical setting. If
Not
we were
practical when
using,
you got a patient standing there and you're trying to work
and
on them. Not at all.
if we wanted to see three patients a day in our clinic, then buy your own Vicon, and it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, right? We're
So
talking
true.
like some of these systems are $1 million for the
Yep.
labs. I was thinking to myself, how could we get a Vicon system in the hands of the everyday NMSK practitioner, neuromuscular skeletal practitioner, or trainer or coach? So when I say NMSK practitioner, I mean coaches, I mean trainers, I mean kinesiologists, I mean chiropractors, physical therapists, yeah, anyone involved in human movement, neuromuscular skeletal, NMSK. How do we get that in the hands of the NMSK practitioner? Because back to my medical background and my family, I was realizing like one of my brothers is an internist. Okay. So he has advanced diagnostic ultrasound. My other brother is a medical doctor. He uses MRIs and different tools and different scans. Every part of healthcare has these incredible diagnostic tools that help to not only diagnose but help to show change over time. Did the intervention that I just did on my patient, did it make a change? Did the chemotherapy or cancer therapy or whatever actually make a change and shrink the cancer cell? Important stuff to know, right?
Quite a
And
bit.
oh, very important. So it's mind boggling to me that in the neuromuscular skeletal space, which makes up over 35% of the healthcare system, there's nothing. We're using goniometers, inclinometers. We're looking at just joints, like a specific joint region. Oh, your shoulder's sore. Okay, well, let's rehab that shoulder. Yeah, but what about how the fact that that shoulder's been sore for quite some time and they've actually been adjusting and becoming frontal plane dominant and recruiting other areas of the frontal plane to lift that arm? I mean, we should address that too.
Let's look at the whole
But,
chain, dang
but
it.
let's look at the
The whole
chain.
chain. Yep.
And so that's what I wanted to do. And I was actually, it's a really funny story because I was trying to find a solution. I was actually at a friend's place one day in chiropractic school, and he invites me over, and he has an Xbox, and this Xbox has this thing called the Kinect camera, which is the Xbox camera.
Oh my God, I
And
remember that.
so, you know,
Yeah.
it was
Oh yeah.
unbelievable. So this is my first time seeing this. So I'm in front of this camera and we're playing this game and I'm moving my body around and it's tracking my body. And I'm like, this is it. So we called Microsoft because why not call Microsoft?
What the hell? What's the worst they could say?
They
No.
actually answered the phone, which is crazy. And we told them our story. We said, we want to do this. And it was my co-founder and I, David Schneier. We said, we want to do this with the Xbox. And at the time was the Xbox version 1 that they had out. And we're like, we want to do this. Can we do this with you guys? And Microsoft's like 100%. It's like, we love having healthcare applications. We love it. So they became a partner. They actually said to us, they said, we have a better camera coming out in a year that's more accurate. We're going to give you one of our 100 that we're sending out early worldwide. You guys can get one. And we got one and we started developing. And I'm not a developer, I'm a practitioner, but we have developers in house and we started to build a company and we started with posture, a 3D posture, 3D range of motion, over time evolved to the point that we then shifted to the Intel sensor when we became an Intel partner. And now we're able to assess over 30 different modules with the iPad Pro because the iPad Pro actually has a 3D sensor and we've built this proprietary code that turns the iPad Pro into like a portable biomechanics lab. So over 30 modules, everything from posture to balance assessment for concussion baseline and rehabilitation. We have a gait assessment. We have a functional movement screen that takes less than 2 minutes to accomplish. We have we with Manchester United soccer,
Whoa, 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 whoa.
football.
Excuse me. Who?
Yeah, Manchester United. We
The Red
actually
Devils?
you got it, man.
You're talking my team now. Now we're
Yeah,
going.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Oh my
yeah. So
goodness.
they contacted it. This is a crazy one. This was actually only like 2 years ago. They had this test that they want to do in I'll say football, but it's soccer for all of us in North America. But all the listeners in Europe, if they hear me say soccer, they're going to be very disappointed with me. So
Little upset with you when you say that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll say football here. They wanted to digitize what they call the ballerina test, and all it is a heel raise test. And what they were doing, it was crazy, is that they would put the player on a box for a heel raise, and they would have one of their kinesiologists sit there with a metronome and hit the metronome. Okay, the other therapist would sit with a ruler and look at the amount of plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, and start to measure that in the heel. And
Interesting.
they would videotape this and they would start to look at when with the metronome, and they had to do the heel raise with the metronome, the player did. At what point were they off from the metronome, and what point did they start to lose that range of motion in the plantar flexion dorsiflexion? Because that actually gives insights into fatigue of the Achilles. And with asymmetry, you can actually get insights on risk of Achilles tendon rupture from this and Achilles tendon injury. They were doing this all manually, though.
Wow.
So they contacted Kinetisense, and we actually digitized. We're the first company in the world. We digitized this test. So it's one of our modules on Kinetisense. I mean, that's just one of our 30 modules,
That
but
is so cool.
shouldn't every single player, every athlete be getting assessed for this? Think about how detrimental and devastating an Achilles tendon injury is.
Well, let's look at how many injuries we had in the NFL this year, this past season, Achilles tendon wise, or the last 2 years. That's a life altering, not just athletically, but life altering injury when it occurs. We both know that. Crazy.
So one of the things that's really important here, and why I think that this is revolutionary, is because we get data. These modules provide data. They don't replace the expert. It's not expert replacement. We're not replacing the expertise of the physical therapist. It's expert enhancement. So this is just another tool in the clinical toolbox for assessment, for rechecking. And because it's data driven, we can look at trend data. Trend data is basically the outputs of assessment. So if your assessments clinically are subjective in nature, or they're 0 or 1 scoring, they're not on a continuum, right? It's all or nothing scoring. If you're doing that, then you're not able to look at trend data. And what the rehab and performance world has been missing is trend data, that being able to look at assessments over time, even if you're assessing that player weekly, to look at improvement and regressions. I'll tell you, where this comes into play. So I'm not going to name the team, but there's an MLB team that won the World Series about 4 years ago that uses Kinetisense. And they were using our functional movement screen. They were screening their athletes every single week, their baseball players, because our screen is so fast. We can do our screen there's a 5-minute screen, and there's one that takes less than a minute for functional
Oh,
movement.
that's
So
fantastic.
it's like the FMS, but like digitized, and it looks at three-dimensional activation patterns. We'll try playing our reactivity is what we call it. We'll talk more about that. It's a whole important concept that I want to talk to you about with looking at the neurology of human movement, but we'll get to that in a point. But they realized in baseball and in football, the majority of injuries happen in the last quarter of the season that are non-contact. So this is,
So true. Fatigue, baby.
oh
Yep.
man,
Yep.
we're talking playoffs here, right?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
that's crazy. So why is that? And what our data has shown is it's a phenomenon called functional fatigue. These players at the end of the season, their travel schedules that are arduous, their sleeping habits, all these different, the stress, all these different things actually start to show in their patterns of movement. And functional fatigue, even if their reaction, is a little bit delayed in their triplanar reactivity of the movement, that then puts that tissue or that jointed injury more so than it was early on in the season. So this team that I'm speaking of, actually would use that data along with other data that they had, because a lot of these MLB teams have data scientists, and a lot of the pro teams do now. And they would
Yep.
actually adjust the training protocol and travel protocols and sleep protocols based on this data.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up, having very few non-contact injuries, and ended up having incredible performance. They won the World Series. They didn't win the World Series because of Kinetisense, but the data
But it
that they're
played a
making,
part.
the data that they were using
Okay.
to make decisions, we were part of that battery of tests. And so we need to take that application to all of our patients. We need to take that application to our athletes. We don't live in a world where human performance enhancement and clinical rehab are on separate continuums anymore. It used to be like that. It's not anymore. So imagine you're a physical therapist. Why can't half of your clinic be performance based, where it's like the non-injured athlete or the
And
non-injured,
more clinics are seeing that for
yeah,
sure.
the non-injured, the pickleballer that's 65 or 70 years old that wants to do whatever they can do to stay active and keep playing pickleball
Oh
and
my
not have
God,
to go to a
pickleball.
senior living facility, right? I mean, pickleball's a
Pickleball.
bad one. Lots of injuries with pickleball.
Oh my
But you're
God.
not, but at least if they're going to play it, which a lot of them are still going to play it, let's try to get them as functionally sound as possible. That's an example. So it doesn't matter whether you're a professional athlete. It doesn't matter if you're like a 75-year-old senior that's just trying to get up and down from the toilet. We all have a functional demand in our day, and we have a functional capacity. So
Which
that
leads to a better quality of life, no matter what
100%.
it is.
So if you think about, in my opinion, if you think about the best rehab specialists, the best performance specialists, you have to establish what is their functional demand. So how do we do that? Kinetisense will actually do that. It'll tell you, okay, on the continuum for this person's age, gender, athlete, sports level, whatever, and their anthropometric measurements. We're the first company to ever do this. We actually will bucket the data based on body type, lever arms, not just age and gender, but your lever arm type, because that affects how we move. How do you rank? Are you in the red, yellow, orange, whatever, green? Where do you rank? That's your functional capacity at any point. In your day, what's your functional demand? Is your capacity past what the demand is? If it is, we're in really good shape. If the functional capacity is less than whatever the functional demand is, that's where we're going to have problems. That's where compensation has to come in. The body has to adapt in a compensatory fashion to be able to meet that demand because our capacity is not there. And that's where we get overload. That's where we get potential injury. This is our compass. So, a clinical compass that allows us to drive and make these decisions clinically over the course of being with that patient or that client to be able to navigate that ship and not just always take the same cookie cutter subjective theoretical approach that we've been doing all these years. And I say that with all due respect because I was one of those
Yeah,
practitioners.
no, that drives me nuts. We talk about it in the classes I teach, and then with our interns, we're preceptors, our clinic, are preceptors for two different universities, and we just tell them cookie cutter, you can't do that. And when they hear it for the first time, those interns sit there going, these college pre-practitioners are going, "What do you mean cookie cutter?" Well, those are well, let's just do this. We know, all right, if you need to stretch this, you need to stretch this. Well, like you said, what else in the chain? And how many of us have had an injury where we sat there, okay, well, my ankle, I screw up my ankle. Now my knee hurts. Now my back hurts. But I'm standing here and I'm sitting here right now and I'm looking at this camera from an
Yeah,
Xbox 360
that was the
going,
Xbox
uh,
One. Exactly.
yep,
You got it.
yep. I'm looking at this camera that you were talking about going,
Yeah.
and I use this to walk around digital Disneyland with my daughter when she was like 7. I never thought about using it kinetically, and that makes so much sense.
Well,
Uh,
it
just
does.
great insight.
Well, and we wanted to do this with something that was commercially available. A lot of practitioners have iPad Pros. It's we didn't want to have to make our own hardware. That was the key. And we
And
were able to
that's
pull it
brilliant
off.
because that saves time, that saves resources, financially huge savings there. The fact
Yeah.
that that was out there is fantastic use of already developed equipment. And you just put it to a different use. So I'm looking at the program right now. I've got my double screen up as we're talking and looking at some of the functional testing that I've looked at before and just seeing how it analyzes the motion on the tablet. Just so revolutionary, which is crazy. It's all there, just no one ever thought of putting it together. And you did, you and your co-founder. I'm jealous, damn it. I'll be honest.
Well, that means a lot. That means a lot, and those are very kind words. And it was really important. Like, so when you look at that, we're showing three dimensions. We're showing the frontal plane, sagittal plane representation, and then there's actually an overhead view of the joints all at once with a single front-facing device. So all you need is one iPad Pro, and you basically get three cameras worth of data in real time at once. The really real cool thing about this, it's a concept we call it triplanar reactivity. Triplanar reactivity is how does the body adjust in the three planes in an activation pattern to do a certain movement. And if you think, let's think about walking, for instance. How does our body adjust three-dimensionally, sequentially? When do I start the rotation of my hip versus my shoulder plane? When do I get into frontal plane tilt accordingly to clear? All of these different metrics of activation patterns, these have never really truly been analyzed in research from a large population standpoint because it takes so long to get the data on these. It takes like an hour to run through a Vicon.
Oh,
So
yes.
so there are some studies on activation patterns, but it's always age and gender. No one's ever looked at anthropometric measurement, which is femoral length, spinal length, all these different things, which has a huge bearing on activation pattern. Over the last 8 years, 9 years, we've been collecting this in the cloud, this non-identifiable data, and we have one of the largest biomechanical repositories in the world of human movement with this tagging that then we loop back into the system to score that patient or client in real time. And we're figuring out with these activation patterns what is ideal and not ideal, and also showing center of mass trace. So it's amazing when you have, an osteoarthritic hip patient. They come in and their right hip's been killing them. and they come and see the orthopedic surgeon and the physical therapist, takes them through a gait assessment, we can actually see their center of mass trace shifting off onto their better side in their gait cycle with kinetisense. Post surgery or post rehab, all of a sudden the center of mass equates itself. How valuable is that in itself? And the really cool thing is that with kinetisense, when we're doing our functional movement screens, we're actually looking at the subconscious part of movement. We're actually looking at the part of the brain that is subconscious that activates us into these different planes to get the job done. When we're walking or running or going to catch a football, are we thinking about every single joint that we're activating? Are we thinking about
Hell
fascial
no.
planes that we're like activating? It's like, no, we're
Not at
not.
all.
Our body has developed a sequencing. I think about it. I used to live in LA, right? I don't know if you've ever been to, have you been to LA? Have you been to LA?
That's where I live.
Oh, you live in LA.
Oh
Okay,
yes. Oh
perfect.
yes.
So I used to have to commute. I went from downtown LA where I lived to Whittier. So
Oh
that was a
fun. Oh
45
fun.
minute drive, no traffic.
If
But
you're
if you're
lucky. Yep.
yeah. And the freeway system's insane. And so there are a bunch of different ways you can get there. And there's all these different freeways, but there's one main freeway that will get you there the fastest. And there's all these side roads and off ramps and things. I think of human movement the same way. I think of as an athlete or whatever, there's the primary pathway that let's call it the ideal pathway that's going to get me there the fastest. It's direct. And then we have all these offshoot pathways that they're not as good. They're going to delay us. They're going to slow things down. There's maybe, a higher risk for accidents and stuff on these side because there's more stops and starts and stop signs and whatever, right? It's kind of like that with the human body. And I think about the neurology of human movement. What is the pathway that is going to get us purity in movement or get our activation patterns to be more pure, so that we can have more power, more speed, all these different things, and take away compensation and putting planar load on the joint that's not supposed to have it. Asking the knee to rotate in the transverse plane over and over and over because the hip isn't rotating. And then the tissues of the knee are like, that's it, boom, go, right?
Not a
Had
fan.
enough,
Don't
had
like
enough of
that.
this.
I'm injured. I'm injured. I'm inflamed. I'm mad at
Yeah,
you. Yep, totally.
exactly. So, I mean, and all of a sudden we get these non-contact ACL injuries that all the guy was doing was cutting one way that he's done 1,000 times and his knee goes on. Well, why? Why? The myelination pathways, these are affected by how we train. These are affected by things like previous injuries, these planar compensations,
Totally,
all of these
totally.
different things. We'll call it our computer code of movement is in our brain. So kinetisense is the only movement screen that looks at, we call it triplanar reactivity. How does the body sequence in a three-dimensional way that the naked eye cannot pick up, and actually scores that and provides that information. It actually maps out the joints that need mobility and stability based on the functional planar mapping of neurology. And then you can then send corrective exercises, start to treat these areas. So I might have a patient that has a right shoulder issue that is painful in abduction and let's say external rotation. But imagine I can map the entire body, not only treat that shoulder, but look at the planar compensations of the entire body and actually start to alleviate strain or stress on that shoulder. I can maybe get some rotation and extension back in that thoracic spine, and which would show up in the movement screen. Or maybe they have a lack of flexion at the hip or rotation at the hip, and they're an overhead athlete that's a pitcher, and they can't rotate around their hips, so they're starting to drive that through the shoulder or through the elbow.
Oh yeah, just
Or,
point right there. Pitchers
right?
galore. Yeah,
Oh,
no.
100%.
Shortstops, we've got elbows galore
There's a
in the high school
correlation
sports right now.
between Tommy John surgery requirement and lack of rotation in the leading hip, along with triplanar reactivity issues between the shoulder axis and the hip axis, and arm slot, of course. So, I mean, we can start to take strain off of these different joints, these different areas of the body. We can start to disperse that properly. We could start to reduce energy leak. But how do we do all these things if you're a physical therapist, chiropractor, trainer? How do you do that? Well, you have to have a system that
Mhm.
assesses objectively that then can immediately compare to normative data of that population set for age, gender, and anthropometric measurement. It's critical.
Elevate your knowledge, ignite your curiosity, and compete with the best minds at events hosted by the American Academic Competition Institute. AACI's sports medicine competitions feature practical exercises, challenging quizzes, specialty tests, and keynote speakers that foster knowledge and social engagement in healthcare and sports medicine. Go to aacitest.org for more information on upcoming regional and national competitions. Sign up for the ultimate intellectual showdown. So I'm looking at the Kineticis analysis system right now and just thinking as you're talking about different patients I've had, whether, I mean, we talk baseball quickly and God, man, they're really keeping us in business at the high school level right now, secondary
Right.
school level with the amount of overuse that's happening because they're playing 2, 3 teams at the same time and they're not telling pitch count to their next coach. I love how it just automatically puts those, what we would call in EA sports, those dots
Yeah.
on the body. So it completely finds the functional movement location, the joint location, puts the dot on there. And then the analysis part where it shows you, lower extremity power score, low 46%, functional asymmetry index, very high. It kind of gives you the non-cookie cutter for this patient. I love that because it'll sit there and analyze what you got going on. How can we as clinicians use another tool here? And this is a great looking tool to improve what's going on with our patient. It all comes back to your initial comment. I was a goalie.
Mm-hmm.
My knee started hurting, then my hip started hurting, and then my back started hurting. And I know when so many of us started clinically and we were being educated, we were taught, look at the
Mm-hmm.
problem and fix the problem. Definitely nowadays, as you said, FMS is really making us look at the entire chain. But when you're in a room at the high school level where I work, and you're hit with 150 kids in the matter of an hour and a half, that's less than ideal. But a tool like this used quickly could really help you analyze and take care of that kid long term for the next 4 years. This is pretty damn cool, to be honest.
200 kids. There's actually a group that goes out and analyzes high school athletes. They're a clinic system. They're a partner of ours. They do 200 athletes in half an hour because
Holy moly.
they'll have multiple iPads shooting off into the different corners of the gym. And they'll take, and again, we have a functional movement screen that takes less than a minute. So the efficiency, I'm a clinician at heart. I don't practice right now because I'm doing this full time with Kinetisense, but I understand the importance of efficiency, objectivity. The system writes out a portion of my SOAP notes in paragraph form for me. So all I have to
Oh
do
my God, that's
is just copy
phenomenal.
and paste that right into my EMR. I can have free 3D posture screen for new patients to come in and my front desk staff can run it. I can hire a kinesiologist and make a little space and make a little movement lab where they're doing all my assessments for me and I'm just treating. So my efficiency as a practitioner is much higher. I can see 20, 30% more patients a day and still give a very high level of care, even a higher level of care. So yeah, the efficiency really is everything. And that's what this is designed to do. It's designed to augment the quality of care. The craziest thing, and we built this for practitioners, but we quickly started to see how this really impacted the patient. The patients are blown away. If you can superimpose that iPad on like a smart TV, or screen share on a smart TV where the patient can just see their joints light up and on the screen while they're moving. The wow factor, the buy-in, it's unbelievable for the patient.
It's them. It's personal. They can take ownership when they sit there and see it with their own eyes.
They can, and the compliance goes up, their willingness to want to improve goes up. If you send them the corrective exercises through Kinetisense, there's a library you can send. Like they're going through those. You can track their compliance because it sends back their compliance report. It just really augments really the whole practitioner, patient, trainer, client relationship. And they're like, wow, this practitioner, this trainer, this coach is using data to drive my care. And I've never seen this in a clinic before. This is different. This is value add. This is science. So what happens is we actually did a study on this, and we found that the patient to practitioner perception went up 25 to 30%. So their view of their practitioner went up that much by just having an assessment that was three-dimensional like that. And at the end of the day, we think about we have all these gimmicks, or I shouldn't say gimmicks, but when you go to like, the physical therapy trade shows, you go to the chiropractic trade shows, we see all these different treatment systems,
All
right?
these fancy tools, all these
All these
bells and
tools.
whistles.
We
Yep.
we we are so, I mean, we have such a mindset that we monetize through treatment. We're practitioners, so we got to have lasers. We have all these different things, and these are all great things to have. Absolutely. But it's all we're geared to our monetization and growth of our clinic, and everything is really geared to in the treatment side of things. What if we could actually really, objectify, make efficient, and monetize the assessment part? That's the missing link for every clinician, I think.
And that's the
And
key to healing the patient.
key to healing the patient, because the patient, at the end of the day, what drives our success as clinicians or trainers or gym owners, it's the client, the patient. They are our customer. And if they feel like you're providing a higher level of assessment that's validating your treatment because you're showing change over time, you've immediately built trust that normally could take months or years to establish. On the first session, you're establishing that trust because you're showing them data. It's a game changer. And a lot of these patients will come in as pain patients, but because you're screening them and you're introducing them to the concept of functional movement, of purity of movement, of trying to reduce, abnormal joint load and trying to keep them active long term, longevity is the word, longevity of human movement, they then want to come back and keep getting treated and worked on from a performance standpoint, even when they're out of pain. And we have clinics that have 95% pain patients, injured patients, 5% performance, that have taken Kineticence, have gone out in the community. We have a golf screen now. They're going out to the golf clubs and screening the golfers. They are now a 50-50 performance and rehab clinic. It's amazing because if we start doing that, you can start to shift away from insurance billing only and all these
Oh,
different,
yes.
you actually develop a lot of freedom in your practice.
Well, the nice thing is, you're decreasing the potential of injury if you're doing that pre-screen and saying, hey, I see this as a future issue. Let's correct it now. And that's not the way that healthcare works right now. We wait for them to come to us, but getting out there. And I know I have a lot of friends that are healthcare and PTs. They own their own clinic, and that's part of the problem. They need to get into this pre-care,
Right.
and if they can, geez, a whole new, fortunately I work at a high school, so I don't worry about the billing part, but a whole new revenue stream because you're not worrying about insurance. This is something they're doing pre-injury, and they're going to
Right.
come in, want to get treated, want to get better, want to improve their golf game, want to improve their pickleball game, as you said earlier, or maybe they're just doing senior hockey. Who knows?
And the value, I'll just add to that, that ability to play those sports, to do those things, I mean, that is what brings happiness to their life. And if we can enhance that ability that they have, that's everything.
I would have to agree with that part. Now, I do have a comment about the software. I'm looking at it as we're talking, and I'm going through things, and I love the fact that I still have my Xbox 360 camera, so I could pull that out and go, "Oh my God, look at this thing!" I could have been with you, damn it. I'm looking at the functional screening where it kicks up the skeleton and it shows your patient. And I'm noticing now I'm slightly colorblind, so I might get the colors wrong. So help me out if I do. It looks like we have a red. What screening is this? Proven ROI generator. We have a CAMS slash 80%. We have a dot. Is that a blue dot or a green dot?
Blue dot,
Blue
yes.
dot. Yeah, I
Blue
got it
dots,
right the first time.
blue dots are mobility issues,
Okay.
and red
Ah,
dots are
okay.
stability issues.
Stability, because I see that red one in the knee and I'm going, Is that pain? Is that injury? Is that so red means stability problems?
Stability issue. And then we also break it down by plane. So each one
Okay.
of those dots, it'll tell you if it's frontal plane, sagittal plane, or transverse plane. So I can build right from that, and that's from a 1 minute functional movement screen. It takes over 250 compensations, three-dimensionally. The system then takes that data, runs it through AI and machine learning based on the normative population sets, and then provides that functional, it's called functional planar mapping. So the mapping of the areas that we need to go after for mobility, stability, and also plane that are then going to help to drive better movement and a more purity of movement.
Which
So
is really
again,
what you want with anybody, whether
it's
they're
like,
athlete or
yeah,
non-athlete.
it's
Yeah.
like an MRI. We call it the movement MRI.
Without all the rad being shot at you, right?
100%, no
Yep. Yep.
radiation. But the movement
Wow.
MRI, people go and get full body MRIs, right? They sometimes we're actually seeing this in the healthcare system where they're doing this as a baseline. Why shouldn't we be baselining every single human being with a functional movement screen?
And that was going to be one of my questions a few minutes ago, but I was sitting here. I gotta say, I was fanboying because all the data and the research and the comments, and I'm a clinical geek, so I'm loving it. But you could sit there and baseline everybody and try and find preseason issues to fix throughout the year, right?
100%. I think that every single human should be baselined on this because if an injury does occur and you're a practitioner in a community and you have the baseline data for that individual, think about the power of how you can then not only, rehab that injury post injury, but then be able to see has that tied into the full neural functional movement of the entire body, and you know what the baseline is of how they moved previous. Think about how this impacts med legal stuff, right? Disability,
Oh my, yeah.
personal injury,
Oh God.
right?
Yep.
It's powerful. If we have a baseline, we know the direction we have to take. We already have a map as to how to get to our destination. So
Damn.
baselining is everything. And
Damn.
that's why, like, if we go to every single, high school, if you're a practitioner in a town and you go to every single high school and surrounding it, and you just start baselining the high school kids, just to baseline them, how huge is that? I guarantee you, if they get injured, guess what clinic they're going to be going to?
One with the baseline.
100%.
Totally.
We have clinics that have started brand new clinics that are completely full within 1 year that are overloaded with patients because they use this technology to build their clinic.
I'm thinking of the applications in our sports medicine clinic at the high school, and just with 600, we're a smaller school. We got 620, 640 kids. Excuse me, young men, all boys school, young men. We have 650 openings for athletes. That's how many sports and teams. And I'm just thinking constantly, how could we improve? How can we analyze? How can we figure out what's going on? Wow,
Yeah.
this is a tool in the toolbox that could really make a difference in so many ways.
Well, and think about this too. Even if you're just doing baseline screening, so you do the baseline screen with the FPM mapping of the avatar of that athlete that immediately pops up after a 1 minute screen. There's over 1,000 corrective exercises in Kinetisense that you can build right away off of the mapping, the functional planar mapping, a quick corrective list of movements of, stability, mobility of different joints they should do based on their mapping. And all you do is hit send, and it immediately shows up on the athlete's phone on their app.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So they can now click through, if they're supposed to do it once a day or go through their protocol every 2 days, whatever, they go through the protocol. And if they swipe through their protocol, it sends you a compliance report. Did they do it? Did
You're
they only do
kidding me.
20%? Did they do
That's nice.
100%?
That's
So, I mean,
nice.
and then you screen them again, maybe it's a month later, give them a whole new set of correctives because technically, if they're doing their correctives that you gave them previous, they're going to have improved mapping and new joints are going to pop up. And then we go
In
out.
theory, yes, definitely. If they're
In
doing it
theory,
in
exactly.
theory,
Theory. Worst case, the baseline data is there. So even if they're not doing their correctives, even if they're, if they're non-compliant or whatever, if they do get injured, you now have a baseline and then you can work from there.
I'm still stuck on the fact that you get to work with the Red Devils. That's my team. That's been my team forever. So
Well, that's just That's just
That's
one
so
of
cool.
many. That's just
Uh,
one of many groups. There's a paradigm shift that's happening, right?
mhm.
And this is starting to become the gold standard. This is starting to become the new normal. The large, rehab groups, clinical groups, professional sports teams are jumping on this. In the next 5 years, we are going to be going to more digitized assessments, and the insurance companies are going to drive this. We're already starting to see that they're making it a lot more difficult for providers that use subjective assessment and SOAP notes that are subjective to get paid.
I've seen that a
And,
lot.
and
Yeah.
yeah, whereas when you send in a Kinetisense report, boom, it's not a problem.
Because
And
it's black and white
15
and it's
and
digitized.
15
Yeah.
to digitize 15 different CPT codes that you can bill using Kinetisense. You can actually bill CPT codes with Kinetisense because it's objective data. So
Now, for those listeners that don't know CPT codes, can you?
yeah, so in the US and some other countries, we have a coding system where if we bill insurance, and not every clinic does, we can actually use these codes to bill insurance and get remunerated by insurance, but you have to have data to support that treatment or what have you. So again, in a lot of clinics are becoming more cash based because there's a lot of
Quite
freedom
a
when
few,
you're going to get
definitely.
paid. Yeah, you're not going to be waiting 3, 4 months, 5 months to get paid by the insurance company, get paid right away. But to have a cash based practice, you have to have more inherent value because their customer is the client, they're paying out of pocket. So how do you add more inherent value?
And I think a lot of people also forget they're not just patients, they are clients because they can choose to take their business elsewhere.
They are. And you know what? When they take home a Kinetisense report, they take it home and they show their family and they show their friends and they show their teammates, like, look at my score, look at what I had this done at my clinic. Did it. It's amazing how the referrals start to come in as well.
I would imagine. Now, I'm fortunate. I don't have to bill. Where we work, it's all school based. We're part of the
Right.
program, and technically we're already paid, which is kind of nice. I don't have to worry about insurance. But at
Right.
the same time, the buy-in. I mean, it becomes personal when they see this breakdown. And again, I go back to this analysis of the little skeleton with the blue and red dots. It's them. It's their deficits, which really is what we're talking about. What deficit do they have? Which freeway are they using to get to that final destination? And I love to use that because my students hear that all the time when we start talking neuro. It's just like taking the freeway. Which off ramp you're going to use to get to that final destination? And it's so true. So something like this tool in the toolbox really makes you more valuable as a clinician to your patient. Very awesome.
One thing that has been really cool is that we're talking like we're obviously it's population normative data that we're comparing that individual to, which is powerful in itself. That premise how, and this is a well-known discussion point, and you would know this well because you work with youth athletes, but the problem with early specialization in sport,
Oh God.
huge
Oh
topic,
God.
right?
Huge topic right now.
We
Yeah.
know, like, if we start to do early specialization at a young age, we start to get this young athlete only playing one sport. We're the worst here in Canada. With hockey, we have our winter hockey, and then we have our spring hockey, and then we have our summer hockey. So these kids are playing
Wait,
hockey.
wait, wait. Isn't that called swimming?
Yeah.
Now I'm from the US, so I
Yeah.
could be totally wrong, but
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, exactly. So at a young age, and the research well, these kids that specialize at an early age, they have a much higher chance of significant non-contact injury.
Oh God,
They,
yes.
they also, very few of them actually make it to a real elite level. I think some research showed that with NCAA Division I football players, like American football players, 80% of them were multi-sport athletes up until the age 16 or something like that, right? So our data actually figured out, well, we have a theory as to why that's the case. And what our data has shown is that these athletes that are early specializers that start at a young age, they actually become planar dominant. So they start to
Totally believe that. Yeah.
the subconscious neurology, the myelinating patterns, they can move really well. Like a hockey player is a sagittal plane movement mostly. So they're really good moving sagittally, and they actually lose the ability to properly activate in the transverse and frontal plane when they need it the most. And that occurs at certain points of the game. All of a sudden, they need to pivot, they need to shift, or they get hit, or whatever. And the body is slow and reacting in that plane becomes they become planar dominant. So the best athletes that have been multi-sport, we actually found out it's not necessarily that we need to have our young athletes playing different sports. It's that if they're in a planar dominant sport, they need to be training off the ice or off the pitch, the other planes that they're
That makes total
deficit in.
sense.
It's
Yeah.
called planar plasticity. And the best athletes in the world, the Shohei Otanis, the Mike Trouts, these different players, I'm talking baseball, right? The Messis, these guys have planar plasticity. They naturally move and can shift beautifully in all three planes when they need to. And that's why they're considered the creme de la creme of their sport.
Yeah. Wow, my mind's just exploding right now with ideas and comments and thoughts, and I'm just loving all this. The information that we're going to kick out to our colleagues and our friends that listen to this broadcast. Everything you're saying, you're preaching to the choir on this end. So, it's nice to hear someone put it into terms and put it into a program that's so easily usable, which
Well, that's
is
the
wow.
really important thing is that it's there's a lot of high level data algorithms, AI, machine learning, all that stuff in the back end, but we design this to be easy to understand by any practitioner, trainer, coach. It's an avatar with blue and red dots and and a number from 0 to 100
There
with
we go.
with red, yellow, green. It's meant to be super easy to digest.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Love it. We're nearing the end, and this has been fantastic. I'd like you, if you don't mind, because these are my favorite kind of interviews, because I didn't really have to ask many questions. We just talked and let you go, and very educational. If you could give somebody a piece of advice, looking back, what you've gone through over the last, you said, what is it, 8 to 9 years now that you've been working on this. What is some advice you could give the next generation entrepreneur or practitioner that's trying to find their niche and looking at things differently?
Yeah, great question. So two different questions. The entrepreneur of the future expect a lot of ups and downs and a little bit of a wild ride to get to where you want to get to, but stop and smell the flowers along the way. That would be my advice to any entrepreneur and also a clinic owner because clinic owners are entrepreneurs.
They
Stop
really
and smell
are.
the
Yeah.
flowers along the way. Take time to realize what you've done and celebrate what you've done. Now, for the practitioner, coach, trainer of the future, start to look at creating a toolbox of assessments that are data driven because this paradigm is shifting. And if you start to build that toolbox now, you're going to be way ahead of the game. And you're going to have a period of time here to really differentiate yourself. That would be my advice to the practitioner, to the coach, to the trainer, is start to apply high level assessment tools in a toolbox, not just one, not just Kinetisense. Kinetisense is one of your tools. Get some other ones too, and make your own little proprietary screen. Make something special, make something different that no other clinic is doing. Step outside of the box. Don't just conform, right?
Amen to that part.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, wow, this was so much fun. I know we were talking in the beginning and we thought, yeah, this is going to be an easy one. And thank you. It was. I love it. This was great, really informative, very helpful clinically. Love to take a few minutes afterwards to talk to you. So before we say goodbye, don't hang up on me. This was great. I'm glad we finally got to sit down after all this time and make it happen. Hopefully, our listeners feel the same way. And just want to say thank you very much for being on Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More. Hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week and enjoy whatever season of hockey you guys are in up there. So,
It's been
Thanks.
an honor, Eli. Thank you for having me. I would love to come back anytime. So it was the pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
I guarantee we'll be circling back. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Want to make sure you hear every episode? Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to our podcast. Don't forget to share our podcast with your colleagues, family, and friends. Your support will help more people find and enjoy our content. Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More is directed by Eli Halleck. It is produced by Gabriel Halleck. Our theme music is by Coma Studios via Pixabay. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the contributors. Want to know more about us? Visit us at wrapituppodcast.com. That's with one P, wrapituppodcast.com. Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More is a production of Halleck Consulting, LLC.